Right then, GCSE English Lit fans. Back for another deep dive. This time, we're going to be tackling love and relationships. Specifically, we're looking at a poem that kind of throws out the rule book when it comes to all that soppy stuff.
Absolutely. If you're expecting hearts and flowers, you might want to look away now. We're going deep into Thomas Hardy's neutral tones.
Exactly. Now, this poem, like a lot of Hardy's work, it can be a bit bleak, but stick with us because we're going to unpack all those layers of meaning, and trust me, it's well worth it.
Definitely worth the effort. It's a bit like, those optical illusions. At first glance, it might seem simple, but the more you look, the more you see all these hidden depths and complexities.
Absolutely. So, our mission today, if you choose to accept it, is to break down how Hardy uses language, imagery, and structure to portray this really unsentimental, some might even say cynical, view of love.
Right. And to show you how even a poem that seems so, well, neutral on the surface can pack a real emotional punch. It's one of those poems that stays with you long after you finish reading it.
Definitely one of those poems that makes you think. Okay, so first things first, let's set the scene. The poem opens with this very specific and kind of gloomy setting.
Yeah, it does. We're straight in there. We stood by a pond that winter day. No messing about. What do you make of that word winter right from the off?
Well, I don't know about you, but winter always makes me think of coldness, things dying, coming to an end.
Right. And it's not just any old day, it's a winter day. So there's this instant feeling of bleakness and maybe even a sense of things being, well, kind of dead.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the setting itself is reflecting the state of the relationship, frozen, lifeless. Hardy's using pathetic fallacy there.
Spot on. It's like the environment is mirroring the emotions of the speaker. So we've got this cold setting, and then there's the word stood. Not walked, not talked, just stood. Why do you think Hardy chose that specific verb?
Hmm, that's a good question. Stood feels very passive, doesn't it? Almost like they're stuck frozen in that moment of the relationship's, well, demise.
Exactly. It emphasizes this sense of stagnation, like they're unable to move on or even connect with each other. And then we get that image of the starving sod. It's not exactly a pretty picture, is it?
No, not at all. It's bleak. Starving suggests a lack of nourishment, almost like desperation. And sod, well, that's just bare earth, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lifeless.
Yeah, barren and infertile. You're not going to grow anything there. And the sound of those words, starving sod, all those sounds, that sibilance, it almost whispers this feeling of emptiness and despair. It's really effective.
Yeah, totally agree. It's almost like the landscape itself is echoing the speaker's emotional state. And then there's the color palette, or rather the lack of one. Everything is so washed out, monochromatic.
Right, we have the white sun and the leaves were gray. It's almost as if all the vibrancy, the color has drained out of their world, just like it's drained out of their relationship.
Yeah, like all the life has been sucked out of it. And it's interesting that word white. We often associate it with purity and innocence, but here it feels cold and empty.
It does, doesn't it? And then there's that unusual description of the sun as though chidden of God. What do you make of that?
It's strange, isn't it? Chidden means scolded or told off. So even something as usually positive as the sun is being presented as punished or disapproved of.
It's almost like there's this sense of something being fundamentally wrong or cursed about their being together, as if even nature is against them.
Yeah, I get that feeling too. And then those leaves fallen from an ash tree. It's not just any tree, is it?
No, it's specifically an ash tree. Now, ash trees are often associated with, well, death and endings in folklore.
Right. And fallen leaves themselves, they always make me think of autumn, things dying and decaying.
Exactly. So again, it's reinforcing that feeling of decline, the absence of warmth or vitality in the relationship. It's all gone. So we've got this really bleak setting, and now Hardy starts to zoom in on the couple themselves, or rather, the lack of connection between them.
Yeah, and this is where it gets really interesting. That line, your eyes on me were as eyes that rove over tedious riddles of years ago. There's so much going on there.
Absolutely. First, eyes that rove. It suggests a lack of focus, almost a disinterest, right?
Yeah, like the speaker isn't even worthy of their ex-partner's full attention. And then tedious riddles of years ago, that's just brutal. It makes the speaker feel so insignificant, like their shared history is just a boring inconvenience.
And don't forget the enjambment there, how the sentence flows from one line to the next. It mirrors that wandering gaze, those eyes drifting off, unable to settle on the speaker. And some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. What's the impact of that verb played there?
Well, it's like their conversation wasn't a real conversation, just a superficial game. It emphasizes the lack of genuine connection, the fact that they're just going through the motions.
Yeah, exactly. There's no real depth or meaning to their interaction. And look at the alliteration there with lost and love. Those hard gulm sounds almost reinforce the finality of their loss, the harsh reality that their love is gone.
Okay, so we've established this sense of coldness, disconnection, and then Hardy throws in this really powerful metaphor. He describes the smile.
Right, this is where it gets even more intense. The smile on your mouth was the deadest thing, alive enough to have strength to die. That's quite a statement, isn't it?
It is. A smile, something that's usually associated with happiness and warmth, being described as the deadest thing that's so unsettling.
It is. And then that addition, alive enough to have strength to die, it suggests that it's this lingering, toxic remnant of something that was once real, like a ghost.
Yeah, like even the remnants of their affection are tainted with this sense of pain and decay. And then he goes on, and a grin of bitterness swept thereby, like an ominous bird a wing. It's almost like the negativity is taking over.
It is. It's personifying bitterness, making it an external force. And that simile of the ominous bird, it adds this sense of foreboding, of something bad having happened or about to happen.
Yeah, like a warning. It also makes you wonder, is this a reflection of the speaker's internal state? Is he projecting his bitterness onto the world around him?
It's a good question. It could be that his own feelings are coloring his perception of everything. And remember, birds often carry symbolic weight in literature. An ominous bird here certainly reinforces the negativity surrounding this whole encounter. This stanza really hints at a deeper conflict, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It wasn't just a gentle fading of feelings. There's a real sense of pain and resentment here.
Right. And now the poem shifts to the lasting impact of this experience on the speaker. He says, "Since then, keen lessons that love deceives, and rings with wrong have shaped to me." That repetition of the W sound there, rings with wrong, it really emphasizes the struggle to articulate the pain, the sense of being betrayed by love.
Yeah, it's almost like he's physically wrestling with those words, trying to get them out. And
Yeah.
the way he describes those lessons as keen, it suggests they've cut deep, left a lasting mark. And those lessons have shaped his view of everything. He sees your face and the God-cursed sun and a tree and a pond edged with grayish leaves through this lens of past hurt.
It's like the experience has tainted his whole perception of the world. Even things that should be beautiful, like the sun, are now seen as negative because of what he's been through.
And notice how he repeats those images from the beginning of the poem, the sun and the pond. It emphasizes the cyclical nature of the experience, this feeling of being trapped by the past.
Right, it's like he's stuck in a loop of resentment, unable to move on. And that cyclical structure, beginning and ending by a pond, reinforces that sense of stagnation. So we've talked about language and imagery, but what about the form and structure of the poem itself? Each stanza has an ABBA rhyme scheme. What might be the effect of that?
The regularity of the rhyme scheme, it could be seen as offering a sense of control, of containment amidst all this emotional turmoil.
That's a good point, like a structured form containing these very raw, unstructured feelings. And the fact that it's ABBA, with the outer rhymes enclosing the inner rhymes, could even reflect that sense of the speaker being trapped by these memories. Now, the quatrains are mostly written in tetrameter, which means that there are 4 stressed beats per line. It creates kind of steady rhythm. But how does that contrast with the overall atmosphere of the poem, which we've established is quite stagnant?
Well, that steady beat, it almost creates a sense of tension, like there's this underlying unease or unresolved emotion bubbling beneath the surface.
Yeah, I see that. It's like a heartbeat that's just a little bit too fast, betraying the speaker's inner turmoil. And then there's the enjambment, where lines run on without punctuation, and the thesaurus, those pauses within the lines. How do they contribute to the overall feel?
The enjambment, it makes it feel like the speaker's thoughts are flowing, tumbling out, almost uncontrollably. And then the caesura creates these pauses, like moments of hesitation or reflection, which adds to the emotional complexity.
Yeah, it creates this interesting rhythm that's both constrained and emotionally charged. Okay, let's zoom out a bit and think about Hardy's broader use of language and imagery. What are some of the key things we've noticed?
Well, the death imagery is really striking. Deadest thing, strength to die. It creates this ominous mood and subverts our usual expectations about love.
Definitely. And the pathetic fallacy is constant, that bleak winter setting mirroring the speaker's inner state.
And what about the use of metaphor? Would you say Hardy uses a lot of elaborate figurative language here?
Not really, actually. It feels quite direct and, well, kind of bare. which makes the few metaphors he does use stand out even more, like the smile and the ominous bird. Yeah, I agree. It's like he's stripping everything back to its rawest form. No sugarcoating here. And speaking of bear, let's revisit that oxymoron, grin of bitterness. What does that tell us about the speaker's state of mind?
It just perfectly captures that sense of resentment, doesn't it? A grin is usually associated with happiness, but here it's twisted into something bitter. It highlights the pain that underlies the memory. And that seemingly simple adjective, grayish, linking back to the title Neutral Tones, it emphasizes the apathy and lack of feeling that has replaced love.
And finally, those religious allusions, chidden of God and God-cursed son. What do they add?
They bring in this idea of something bigger than just personal disappointment. It's like their love was somehow doomed from the start, cursed by a higher power. Adds a layer of tragedy, I guess.
Yeah, it elevates it to a more universal level of suffering. Now, one thing we need to remember is that we're only getting one side of the story here.
Yeah, this is a first-person poem, so it's a very subjective account. We only hear the speaker's voice, his pain, his bitterness.
Exactly. We don't know how the other person felt or what their perspective on the relationship was. It's a very personal and perhaps even biased account of a relationship's end. Now, thinking about your GCSE anthology, how does Neutral Tones compare with other poems you've studied about love and relationships?
Well, there are definitely similarities with some of the other poems that explore the darker side of love, like Byron's When We Two Parted.
Right, good comparison. How so?
Well, both poems have this real sense of sadness and loss. Byron talks about his heart breaking and a pang, while Hardy gives us that deadest thing of a smile. Both poems also use quite a melancholic tone, but I think Hardy focuses more on the environment reflecting his feelings, whereas Byron is more internal, exploring his own emotional turmoil.
That's a good point. They're both dealing with heartbreak, but in different ways. What about a poem that uses light imagery, like Cosley's Eden Rock?
Oh, interesting. Both poems use light imagery, Hardy with the white sun, and Cosley with the sky whitens. But the feeling is so different. In Eden Rock, the light seems welcoming, almost heavenly. But in Neutral Tones, it's cold and hostile. Chidden of God, remember?
Yeah, it shows how the same image can be used to create completely different effects.
Definitely. What about a more modern poem like Winter Swans by Owen Shears? That explores relationships in quite a complex way.
Good one. What are the connections there?
Well, Winter Swans also shows a relationship going through a tough time, and Shears uses some quite stark imagery, dark water, icebergs. There's also a sense of distance between the couple, like in Neutral Tones, but Winter Swans ends on a note of hope for reconciliation, whereas Neutral Tones feels very final, full of bitterness.
Yeah, that's a key difference. Neutral Tones is very much about the lasting impact of a failed relationship, the way it can taint your view of everything.
Right. So, to sum up our deep dive into Neutral Tones, Hardy uses that desolate setting, the stark imagery, and the poem's structure to create this really powerful sense of bitterness and loss. It's not a romantic poem, but it's a really thought-provoking one.
Exactly. And it's packed with those subtle details and techniques that we've been unpacking, which makes it a really rewarding poem to study, especially for your GCSEs.
So if you're wrestling with this poem, we hope this deep dive has given you some food for thought. Go back and read it again with these ideas in mind and see what else you can discover.
And here's a final question to ponder. When Hardy talks about those neutral tones, is he just referring to a lack of feeling in that specific moment by the pond? Or could it be something more? Could it be that the speaker has adopted this emotional numbness as a way to protect himself from further pain? What other poems in your anthology explore this idea of emotional detachment as a consequence of heartbreak?
Lots to think about there. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. Until next time, happy reading.
Happy reading.